There we go. We're good.
I'd like to call the meeting to order and read the affidavit of posting. This agenda was posted in the office of the county clerk 19th day of February 2021. Notice was sent to the West Bend Daily News, Express News, WIBD, WMBZ Radio, WTKM Radio, My Community Now, Hartford Times Press, Kewaskum Statesman, and the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Next on our agenda is election of officers. And Brad, what are our officers again? We have chair.
President, vice president, and secretary. I'm sorry, chairperson, vice chairperson, and secretary.
Vice chairperson and secretary.
Right, and last go around, we did this by way of just a unanimous consent.
Okay.
And so no real vote was taken other than as everybody kind of want to serve in the same capacities they did, and it was sort of a nod of the head, yeah. So however you want to handle it is fine.
I'm happy with that, so.
Do we need a motion?
Theoretically, no, if you have, I think, just agreement as to how you want to proceed on that.
That sounds good.
We're all on the same, yes, we're
Yes.
fine.
Continue the same appointments then?
Yes,
So that would be Mr. Zorbini as chair, Mr. Alderson as vice, and Ms. Olhaven as secretary, correct?
we have at our place the minutes from our last ethics board meeting, which was April 29th, 2019. We've all had a chance to look at these minutes. They've been sent to us in advance. Are there any changes to these minutes, or can I have a motion for just approval?
I motion for approval.
I second the motion. The motion passes.
And just to let you know that William Alderson is on his way.
Okay. Our next order of business is review the bylaws governing Washington County Ethics Board. And Brad, I'll turn that over to you.
Certainly. So you'll recall, I think a couple of years ago, when we first reconvened after taking some time off, we went through and we rewrote the bylaws. And I presented a copy that the board here was satisfied with. What I'll note is that we did go ahead in October of 2019, we were able to finally complete the recodification of the Washington County Code of Ordinances. And part of that process, we updated the ethics code. This body also weighed in on that and had very valuable input, which we took and put into the code, which you'll see. But what happened was, as a result of that change in the code, some of the references to the code in the bylaws are outdated and need to be changed. So you'll see, if you look at the copy that I provided, for example, in the first paragraph, authority, you'll see where we crossed out 4.31 and substituted that with chapter 40. Chapter 40 is the new ethics code, whereas in the old code, it was in chapter 4.
Right.
So nothing else has changed. You're certainly free to go through these bylaws and review them, make any recommendations. I'm happy to take care of any of the changes you want made, if any. But other than that, I would ask simply the board to approve the revised minutes. We do have a copy then that you could sign today if that's the only change you want made.
Okay.
And get that done. If you want other changes made, I could do that and probably circulate it for signature after the fact. But we did take the liberty of at least updating the code references for you.
I think we went through that pretty thoroughly at the last meeting.
You did.
Yes, very thorough.
You did. And we have actually used the updated bylaws in terms of
Yes.
we've held hearings. So I think they've been helpful and practical. From my standpoint anyways, the legal advisory.
I'll make a motion to accept the changes.
I'll second the motion, and by consensus, we agree with the changes, and we'll sign the document.
Mhm.
There we go, very last page.
Okay.
Okay. Review of the County Code of Ethics, Chapter 40, the new Chapter 40.
Chapter 40. So again, when we were going through the recodification process of the county code, and this goes back, we started the process, I think, in 2017, and it took a couple of years to get it done. It was a massive project. We rewrote the entire Washington County Code. And it was the first time that had been done really meaningfully since probably the 90s, maybe 1998 or 1999. Before that, it was the 70s. So we went through and we convened the various county departments. We hired a professional recodification service who we work with now and went through and updated the code completely. We did come back to this board and talk about some of the places in the ethics code that were sort of cumbersome, the hearings process, for example, and definitions that weren't real clear. I remember we discussed, and we took those things and we put them into the code. I think the minutes of April 29 of 2019 even referenced the fact that we reviewed the process and talked about some of the changes. And because we hadn't met since the code actually was finished in October of 19, I wanted to present to you a copy of the ethics code as it now appears in the county code of ordinances. And you're certainly free to look at it, comment on it, whatever you want in terms of that. But I really think the discussion of this code, the updated code, probably is well served as we move in even to the next agenda item where we can kind of talk about an issue that we've had here at the county, unfortunately, that implicated this code, how the code worked, where we felt that the code helped us, where we think there were issues that implicated this code. And we can almost have that discussion within there if you like. Again, if you've had a chance to review it, I'm happy to take any feedback you have on it. If there's anything you think you don't like about it. The code is a living, breathing document. We can always make changes to it. By no means is this written in stone. But I can tell you that as we used it in working with this issue that we're going to discuss as our next agenda item, it was useful, and we thought it was a well-written and served us well. On top of that, so if there's any comments or remarks you'd like to make about it, just on any initial observations you had, if you had a chance to review it, I'm happy to accept those. Otherwise, I'm proud to present it to you. And also, as we move into the next item, we can talk about how it actually works in practice.
Okay.
Brad, might you just share with us, since last we met, were there any areas that were major revisions or?
I think we really went through and wanted to keep the definitions. We were having a lot of problems with definitions. Things not being clear.
Over there, Bill.
Okay, Bill?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Nobody called me.
Oh, no.
No, I didn't. I got a call about 2 weeks ago, listing a number of different dates. I said, these are good, never heard another word.
Well, my apologies. I thought you had been contacted.
Was that you? Your office?
It probably was,
No,
yeah.
When we're done here, I'd like to check the email because you were sent an email of the agenda. So let's check and make sure that we have the
Yeah,
correct
nothing.
email
Okay.
in our
All right, we'll
office.
check it. My apologies.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
so sorry for
I'm here
that.
now.
Thank you for breaking.
Why are we
I
here?
guess we'll break the news to you then that you've been reappointed as vice chair.
Yes,
Oh,
we've added a whole bit section about buying at the bar and
That's what- That's what happens
That's kind of.
when you're not here.
When you're not here.
we are on agenda item 5.
And
Okay.
Mr. Olson, all we were talking about was back in 2017, we started the recodification process of the entire county code. And part of this, of course, involved the ethics chapter. We had come to this board and talked about some of the changes and revisions that we thought were appropriate. We made great suggestions and we took those and we put them into the code. The code was finished in October of 19. We last looked at it together as a body in April. We were going to look at it again shortly after October of 19, but of course, 2020 didn't go as planned, so we didn't even meet in 2020. But I wanted to present a copy of the code to this body, and we can certainly discuss anything about it that you like. I was mentioning before that.
Did everybody get a copy of these beforehand?
Yes,
Oh, they
should have
did.
been in the emails, yeah. And if you see something in here, take it with you, review it. This is a living, breathing document, and we can make changes, we can revisit it at any time. What I was saying before was the next agenda item, which we're gonna get into here in a few minutes, put this new code into practice to an extent, and it served us very well. It was much easier to use, it was much easier to understand. One of the things that we changed significantly as we look back at it was definitions weren't clear. We defined conflict of interest more clearly.
Right.
We defined personal interest, personal benefit more clearly. And those things were so vague in the old code, it was at times hard to figure out what constituted conflicts and with your assistance, we cleaned all of that up, and I think it really came out well.
Good.
And I'll explain that as we get into the next agenda item. If there's anything that you saw ahead of time you'd like to discuss, great. Bill, if you see something after the fact, give me a call, but I think you'll be pleased.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a chance to look at this, and it is just as you described. I mean, it's very well written, but it's understandable.
Right.
You know, to anybody that picks it up.
Well, there were things in there, if you recall, that talked about having to submit a verified complaint, which what in the world, you know? And so we took those things out, we made it understandable. And of course, that was really you. You sat down with me and walked through it and said, what can you give us a code we can actually use? And I think we've done that.
You know, without disagreement, you know, maybe we should move to the next agenda item where you could just demonstrate, you know, using that as the example how this was. You know, are there any questions for Brad about this, or?
This is the first time I've seen it, so I wouldn't have any. I could certainly take a look
You
at
can
it.
call it
Yeah,
if you
okay,
like.
I'll do that. But I do remember being here and we talked about it.
Yeah,
Oh, we do.
this was an
Simplifying
important part of it.
making it,
Yeah.
Mhm.
So Brad, why don't we move to agenda item number 6, and you can bring us up to speed on this.
Very well. I wanted to address with this board an incident that occurred here at the county that implicated both the Human Resources Department and I think called this code forward for us to have to examine and apply. I'm going to go through the incident with you now. I want you to know that this is a matter that was dealt with, and I'll talk about it a little bit. First and foremost, as a personnel issue internal to the county, which I'll explain. But in learning of it, I believed that it implicated this code of ethics significantly, and I felt that while nobody was coming forward with a formal complaint and nobody had come forward requesting an advisory opinion of this board, I felt it was essential that this be reported to the ethics board. And I'll go through that and I'll tell you exactly what happened and how this code was involved. On January 27th of this year, Mary Beth Borick, who is the Samaritan Campus Administrator, allowed her husband entry into the Samaritan Health Center to receive a COVID-19 vaccination. This was a matter that was in the news. Maybe you've heard of it. As of the date on which this incident occurred, the facility and the general public were not allowed into the facility. So I should say, I should mention, so this was a closed shop at the time. Okay, so nobody could come into Samaritan Health Center unless they were providing direct care to a resident or support to a resident, or was an employee, for example, or perhaps a vendor that had special clearance to come in. So we were not open to the general public. Vaccinations were not being made available through Samaritan to the general public or to the families of employees, or to employees of the county who were not working at Samaritan. So I couldn't, for example, have gone over there to get a shot. While Mr. Borick fell into the group of individuals eligible for a vaccine as of January 27th, he was not eligible to receive one from Samaritan Health Center. Therefore, the incident constituted a breach of Samaritan policy. And it also, and these facts, by the way, are not in dispute. Okay, this was vetted, interviews were held, investigations, and these facts are not in dispute. But I felt that what occurred implicated this code of ethics, and I'll explain where and why. So if you look at the code, where we began with was a look at 40-1A under Declaration of Policy. And I know we have people, I believe, perhaps watching remotely, so if you'll indulge me, I'll go through that, even though you have it in front of you, I'll read. And what 1A says is that public officials and employees, as defined in this code, are committed to the highest standards of ethical conduct in the performance of their public duties, and affirm that individual and collective adherence to the highest ethical standards is central to maintaining the public trust and vitality of the democratic process. This is further supported by 40-2A, which says that a public official is dedicated to the ideals of honesty, openness, and accountability of matters involving county government. That a public employee must perform his or her duties with fairness and impartiality, and avoid the appearance of impropriety. This comes from also sections 40-2, D1 and D3. So in other words, where our code of ethics puts us is that it's essential that public officials conduct themselves in a manner that does not undermine the public's trust. And that's very important. Subsection C, as I referenced, recognizes that certain conflicts, however, may be minor and inconsequential. Other conflicts might be substantial and material. Those are words that write out of the code as well. That's section 40-1C. That's where that's located. So where does this particular policy violation fall? There are a couple of key definitions that are implicated. And again, that's when we clean up those definitions. This is where this was so helpful to do. The code defines a conflict of interest in section 40-3. And that's our definition section. A public official's action or failure to act in the discharge of his or her official duties, which could reasonably expected to produce or assist in producing substantial economic or personal benefit for his or her family, is prohibited. That's defined as a conflict of interest right there. An economic or personal interest is also defined in that section as any interest that may yield directly or indirectly a monetary or other benefit to the public official or to any person employing or retaining the services of the public official or to any member of the family of the public official. So not suggesting it's an economic benefit necessarily, more of a personal benefit. So the question then became, why are those definitions important and why does this matter? So under 40-A, again, going back to that, no public official can act in regard to a personal interest which would impair their independence of judgment, their performance of official duties. Also, no public official, and now in 40-4A, no public official shall knowingly permit the use of county services for personal benefit, except when that service is available to the general public. That's, I think, definitely an implication that we had here. And where this code was implicated and where we looked for guidance. In the end, what happened was that the Human Resources Department conducted an investigation, treating this, as I indicated, as a personnel matter, first and foremost, determined that a violation of Samaritan Health Policy had occurred, and that the nature of the violation also implicated this code of ethics for the reasons I went through. An advisory opinion, as I indicated, was not sought because the HR department conducted this investigation initially within the personnel guidelines of the county and the personnel policies of the county. And determined that, in fact, as it looked at the code, as it looked at personnel policies, this was a substantial material breach of the code of ethics and of Samaritan Health Center policy, and did discipline commensurate with the offense as a result. But that said, we felt it was important to at least report what had happened to this board. This was something that did make news. If the board will allow me to explain, I know what the result of the investigation was. I know what the discipline was. Under the law, as it relates to open records, for example, if we're to release disciplinary records and disciplinary history, an employee is entitled to a notice called a Resnicki notice that would allow that employee an opportunity to get a court order prohibiting release of certain information. And so while this is not open records request that we've received, my concern is that if I get too deep into what actually occurred in terms of more facts, more investigation, more discipline, that I may be implicating that law, and I don't want to violate Ms. Borick's rights that she might have to protect certain information about her personnel file. So I would rather not disclose the nature of the actual discipline itself, but I think it's fair for the public to know at least that we did treat the matter seriously. Administratively, it did implicate the code of ethics. I've asked this board to be convened because for transparency purposes, I wanted to disclose for the public who may be watching, I want them to know this was something that we took seriously here at the county. And that this code of ethics means something, it's important. It's not just a piece of paper that we get together once every couple of years and look at bylaws. On occasion, we do have to take these things into account, and we did. So that's what happened, and that's what we did, and how the code.
So actually what you're doing is you're making a report to this
Yes.
committee with respect to what has already been done and happened, and not requesting any type of an opinion or any type of a situational report from us. You're just making a report and fairly well.
That's correct, and the reason is because it was, first and foremost, came in as it was essentially how it came in was, there was someone who reported what had happened at Samaritan to administration and said, I don't think this should have occurred. And so administration, the county executive's office, referred this matter to Human Resources Department to commence an investigation. At which point, at some point, I was brought into the room and I said, well, I think there's an ethics issue here as well. But first and foremost, because nobody had made a complaint to this board and had requested an opinion of what to do in terms of discipline or in terms of what recommendations, we felt that was clearly defined in the personnel policies how to handle this. And that's what the county did. We have convened this board at times when we were concerned about conflicts of interest. We weren't sure what was the appropriate course of action, what do you recommend? We've had hearings with this body. But we felt at this point in time, this was more of a personnel matter. And yes, it implicated the code of ethics. And because it was a high profile public matter, that if nothing else, we should at least come and report to you and the public what happened and that action was taken, and it was taken quickly and it was treated very seriously. The incident occurred January 27th. We were aware of it a few days after that, and the investigation commenced immediately. It was within about 2 or 3 days or so that they wrapped it up and decided what to do.
Was this something that was self-reported or something that came from, a source came from a third party?
Third party.
Okay.
Third party. Yeah.
It's nice to see that this was helpful. As I look through this, I would have added a couple more, 40G and 40H.
There's no doubt.
Yeah.
There are other places you could certainly find, but these are the obvious things that
Sure,
I wanted to
sure.
call to your attention. And when I looked at it, I went, oh, this jumps out right here. Loud flashing lights.
Where this differs from what we've looked at in the past is, a lot of times they'll bring an issue to us and ask for some sort of an opinion. I agree with the action that was taken. I do view this as a employment issue, a personnel issue. It sounds to me as though it was very thoroughly vetted, investigated. All options were weighed, decision was made, and although I'm not privy to the decision, I trust that it was appropriate to the violation. And again, we're getting an opportunity just to learn about it, to hear about it, and to also see that the work that's been done by the ethics committee, became useful in the process.
It was very, very useful. It provided us a clear path, in terms of understanding what is prohibited and not within the county. And it gave us those clear definitions that we needed, and it helped in that regard. But ethical violations, yes, but first and foremost, it was a violation of the Samaritan Health Center's policies in terms of who was allowed into the facility. And I think that's what kicked it off initially as more of an employment investigation because it was a county policy violation. Then after the fact, I said, I think you have an ethics issue here as well. And I indicated at that point in time that the county should do its investigation, handle it as a personnel matter, but I felt it necessary and appropriate to bring it to the ethics committee as a report, which I can indicate was that course of action was endorsed by the Human Resources Department and the county executive's office. They were aware. So.
Under questions or comments?
Well, you can't be tried twice for the same offense. And as long as it's been handled to the satisfaction of the powers that be, and no request has been made by anyone to bring this board into service, I would think that that's fine.
Right,
It's a non-event as far as we're concerned.
Correct.
yes, I agree. I just think that this here is very very well written, very easy to understand, and very easy to apply to any circumstances.
Well, it was your hard work and we appreciated it.
Mhm.
Because the code prior hadn't been revised in many, many, many years. It really was outdated, and even in terms of the language we used in it. And I think we have a much more modern document that makes a lot more sense.
It's nice to see how it works in action. I mean, it really is. I
Yes.
really appreciate you bringing it to our attention and giving us the opportunity to watch you work through that.
And what you should know, I mean, you know this, but what the public or those who may watch this should know is that this board doesn't have the authority to hand down discipline.
Correct.
This board makes recommendations to the county if the county's uncertain as to what's an appropriate course of action.
Right.
And so therefore, even had this board been convened first, I have no doubt in my mind, the board would have said, well, have you investigated this thing? And, you know, we would have done the things we were gonna do anyway, so, realistically, we did what we.
The violations.
Yeah, we did what we felt was appropriate, and so the no recommendation was sought because we felt it was pretty clear what we had to do internally.
Right.
But again, because this code was implicated, it needed to be reported.
Has the fact that the incident has been taken care of internally by the personnel committee been reported to the public? Not what happened, but just the fact that it was handled and taken care of.
Well, this body is one arm of that, but also the county executive's office, I believe, has issued a press release and made statements. I don't have that handy, but yes, my understanding is that that was absolutely the intention, was to report that, you know, the investigation occurred and so forth. Again, not getting into the details of what actually happened.
I understand that.
But yes.
As long as the incident itself was public, it seems that the resolution of the incident that has been done needs to be made public also to follow up, so that the public itself knows that somebody's not asleep at the switch and taking care of
And I'll follow up with
these
that to make sure too.
Yeah.
that-
Not what happens.
Yeah,
but
that
the
action
fact-
was taken.
Yeah, that action was taken. I think that's important as long as the incident itself was public.
Right. Yep, I will definitely follow up, make sure that, I think that was the intention, I believe, so.
Any further discussion on this? Any other questions or comments that anybody has? Brad, thank you for bringing that to us.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Showing us how a breathing document, a live document can
code in action.
work.
Yeah.
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 So it looks like we're at the end of our agenda. There being no other business before the committee, I'm going to